Hello and welcome to the Hunter Bond podcast, where I get the opportunity to speak to key players and leaders within the world of finance and technology. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Kyle Whittington, founder and managing director of Bad Dinosaur. And they're an award-winning agency or digital product studio based in Scotland. Kyle's background himself is in software development, project management, and as an entrepreneur. Having started his agency in 2013, Bad Dinosaur has grown into one of the most exciting product design and development agencies in the UK. They partner and build, launch digital products with a wide range of web and mobile-based startups and SME firms. So firstly, Carl, thanks for joining, and how are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, it's great. Good to be here. Yeah, excited. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I really was keen to get you on because, we're very interested, especially for people who watch the podcast, people maybe who have a technology background or entrepreneurs or people that want to look into starting a startup or in the process of building products. And for someone like yourself who has not only started your own agency, and I'm sure, again, there's a few people here who might start consultancies or agencies in the future to understand the potential pitfalls or the journey you've kind of gone, hopefully take some knowledge. But ultimately, I think where your agency and you specifically are working a lot with startups or web-based businesses who are developing products, I'm sure the advice and the pitfalls and the flaws you've seen of some of these other companies and the advice you've kind of helped them will hopefully help a lot of our audience as well.
Yeah.
But firstly, I was keen to find out, I guess, a bit more about your background and what your journey has been before even starting the agency.
Yeah, so the first thing your listeners will hear is that my accent's not a Scottish one. So I'm actually originally from South Africa. So I moved across to Scotland about 16 years ago. And yeah, at that point, I was just a software developer, worked in a few different businesses, just doing dev work and kind of getting my head around being a programmer in a commercial space. And then the more I did that, I've always had this kind of entrepreneurial spirit. So even at school, I used to kind of sell, CDs to my school friends. I used to build PCs. Like I always used to take things apart and build PCs for friends and family. And I've always had this, drive to kind of start a business. And once I had the development kind of skill set, I found myself being able to create products myself. So I would come up with a cool idea, and then I could, go ahead and actually build it out. I find that's kind of one of the double-edged swords of being a software developer these days is you have lots of ideas and you have the ability to build pretty much anything that you have to really focus on, picking one thing and maybe spending a bit of time on that. But anyway, I started building products myself. And yeah, I got to a point where I thought I'd be able to actually leave my job and be able to do that just all as a fully functioning business. And that was back in about 2013. And that's when I kind of started the agency to then build products and be able to offer this as a service to other people as I went. Some of those startups that I created myself, like they didn't succeed. And I think that's one of the things that you've always got to get used to in business is a bit of failure, right? Like a lot of the things I started the early days, I learned a lot from, but it certainly weren't successful enough to be able to give me an income to live off of. But that process showed me that I had these skills to be able to create some really cool products and pretty quickly. And there were a lot of people looking for that kind of skill. And so early on, I saw this kind of gap in the market where a lot of agencies weren't really going that route. They were trying to go for Coca-Cola, like big name brands, that they want to work with all these really famous brands. And I was quite happy to start working with entrepreneurs and very early stage ideas. I found it quite cool to be able to help shape this idea and take it to market. So that's kind of where Bad Dino started, was just being around those types of people and then saying, well, I can do that for you. And soon it became a service that we then kind of grew out from, hired some designers, hired more developers, and kind of grew the agency from there. So yeah, it's been quite an interesting journey.
Yeah, well, touched a few points there. What would you say would be the major differences between like an agency working with a massive brand like Coca-Cola? I imagine the infrastructure is a lot different. There's a lot more red tape, a lot more stakeholders to manage, and I guess supporting more of a startup or another entrepreneur building their products.
Yeah, they're very, very different. And I think early on, maybe nowadays, you'll find some of the bigger agencies do go for entrepreneurs. They will try and work with them. But what it came down to back then was just purely the price tag. A lot of the people who I worked with, entrepreneurs, if they approached some of those agencies, they would be like, well, it's 100 grand, 200 grand minimum spend. Where I was coming in being like, well, if you've got 10 grand, I can probably build you something in a few weeks that you can take to market and prove, or potentially get further investment on. But in agency life, and I kind of understand it now after running an agency for so many years, that getting lots of little clients can be quite a challenge to deal with. You know, we often talk about having one large client has the same overheads as having, you know, one small client. They both go through the same kind of challenges, but the small clients only bring in, you know, 20 grand of revenue compared to 200 grand of revenue. You can get into this phase, you know, we call it death by 1,000 cuts. If you get a lot of little clients, it can be challenging. But that's something that we've adapted to over the years. We are an agency that probably has more clients than most agencies our size. And we've kind of come up with really cool, innovative ways to deal with that, you know, to try and have technology that can really help out managing those clients and making sure that we can gather feedback in the right way, and all these little things that can give you that little extra kick. Yeah.
Oh, what would that be? I mean, in terms of, because again, is it certain processes or technologies, I guess, that you've had to develop and learn over time, or?
Yeah, just again, because we're software developers, you can just build anything, right? So early on, I found that a lot of the tooling that we would use in the agency just to communicate with the clients around kind of how their projects are running, how much time they had left. We're an agency that runs entirely on time and materials. So everything about us is like fully transparent. The client will buy, say, 100 days of our time, and then they can at any point come and see how that time is doing, how much time they've used, where it's been used. And so we built a whole portal to kind of allow this. Clients can log on at any time and see exactly that breakdown. We've always had that kind of built into our ethos of this transparency.
Yeah.
And I found that early on with T&M, you know, time and materials, it's very much a trust exercise that you've got to get clients to really buy into it. And if they feel like you were doing something in the background that's hiding that information or not being explicit about how it's being spent, that's when you start questioning, like, oh, where's my time going? So we've always been like, it's all on the table. You can see exactly how we spend your time. At any point, you can come check it out. And that builds a level of trust. So yeah, that's one of the tools. The other ones that we use in development is just around there, like backlog management. You know, every product is broken down into something called user stories, which, you know, you can have hundreds of. We took the tooling that was out there, and there's a few really big players in the market, and we kind of took all the best bits from those ones and built our own that was more accustomed to kind of early stage entrepreneurs who weren't really that technical. Right. Quite a lot of those tools we find, if you get given them as someone who's not from a technical background or doesn't come from tech, there's a lot of terminology that's very confusing, and there's a lot of structure to it that you just are like, I don't understand how this works. What's a sprint? What's a milestone? What's a user story? And we could build our own tool that then simplified all that stuff for them. It only gave them the information they needed, and that would make it less intimidating for entrepreneurs to build stuff. Yeah. So
yeah. So a lot of the stuff is more bespokely built. You find you find building your own tools and processes rather than using an app like third party tool benefits you guys more. Would that be? Do you still use third party tools like where it's necessary, or like for the smaller things?
Definitely.
So imagine not everybody would have the time or the resource or you know to start doing that stuff.
And I mean, something that we often tell our clients, right, is don't reinvent the wheel. So although I've just talked about things that we've built it out of a need because we've seen that it is actually a pain point that we had. But we use Basecamp. I mean, for all of our comms with our clients, Basecamp is an amazing project management tool for doing all kind of internal team discussions, messaging and stuff with the clients. We use their tool. We could go create our own, but like they do it really well and they're always optimizing it. Yeah. So one of the first things we always say to clients is like, if there is an off-the-shelf solution, go and do that. So, you know, I often have calls with clients where they'll tell me something and I'll be like, you don't need us. Like there is this thing that can go and do this for you. Use that. If you hit a point where you actually need to customize it and you find that it's too out of the box for your business, then come and speak to us and we can kind of build something custom. But in the meanwhile, don't go and sink 50K into building this. Like these people are doing it, right?
Yeah. And with a startup where, you know, finances and investing money in tools can sometimes, you know, could be make or break if you put your money into how do you as a business identify the needs and where things could be streamlined better? Is it, how do you guys sort of identify?
Do you think like for us or for our clients? Like,
I guess you individually and your clients, you know, both really.
Yeah, I think for us, the decision's quite a hard one. I think sometimes you've got to really look at what can be done in the early stages of your business, or even the early stages of your own business journey. Is do these things satisfy like that 80%, rule? Like, does it do most of what you need straight out of the box? And if it does, great. That bespoke side of it, every business has got its own quirks. I've worked around a lot of business owners, and everyone feels like they've got that special process that no one else does. But very often there is someone out there who's done something similar to you, or is using a similar process to you, that trying to find something just to adapt to in the short run. It's all about exactly that, like not spending too much money up front.
Yeah.
I think that can really choke a business if they focus too much on that kind of stuff early on than the bigger picture.
Do you have situations where there's people in your team that are requesting certain things and you have to kind of juggle what's priority, and how do you deal with that, I guess?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because like it's quite a bit of an inception to talk about, but our backlog tool that we use to gather feedback, we use that tool to gather feedback about itself. So
okay.
so people use the actual feedback tool.
The feedback tool is not particularly good.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. But yeah, we have to allocate some time to it. The truth is, for me, because I'm a developer, I really love that part of it. And probably something that's always inspired me when I've been working on my business is I really love seeing challenges that people have in the company and trying to then work out software that can help them. So I will very often look at kind of inefficiencies and be like, oh, cool, I can build something to do that. And that's kind of like a hobby side of it. Like I'll do that outside of business hours because I'm like, hey, this is really intriguing for me. And so in the same way, when people drop in new features that they want for it, I've got a backlog I'll run through every once in a while. And some evenings I'll sit and just be like, cool, I'm going to build some stuff out. The team sometimes get involved in that stuff as well. We've had some really good output from them when we've been doing some new like designs and things like that. But yeah, making sure as an agency, as you know, it will be it's hard to always carve that time out because it's non-billable and you've got to always make sure that the business is running. But those kinds of projects are also really great for people. The team can really
they get to use it themselves as well. If there's products they're going to use, they're going to put it into production. That I guess that feels like they created something, themselves that they can actually utilize. That's a good question. That's good. That kind of brings on to, I guess, time management as well. You mentioned you've got lots of different clients, and I imagine you've probably got developers that are working on multiple projects at the same time potentially, or how do you prioritize? How do you manage that? Because I know, especially with smaller agencies, especially if you're a manager, a founder, a CEO, you've maybe got some yes men in your business who will take on everything without, and then you're like, why hasn't this been done? Why hasn't it been done? Yeah. And it's because they may be afraid to say, look, I don't have the time for this. I don't know how to prioritize. What advice would you give to other managers or maybe founders in that situation?
Yeah, I think in the agency, especially managing a good schedule. So we have an amazing project manager, Hannah, who deals with all of our scheduling. And it's effectively just a huge calendar of every single person and what they're working on, down to like, a few hours a day they're doing this, a few hours a day they're doing that. And that is a bit of a puzzle. So that whole process is all about when we sign off on new work, if a client is wanting new work, we see where we can fit that into the schedule. And it's a bit of a jigsaw because you have to kind of try and make sure that you're putting work on the same people who might already know that project.
Yeah.
That's one of the things in agency world that clients can get annoyed by, is if you kind of chopping and changing the resources working on it. They don't have that domain knowledge. So just being really tight about schedule. So again, we built our own tool for doing it because it was one of those things that we saw as like a real linchpin. But there's a lot of tools out there, Monday.com. There's a bunch of different ones that do this kind of time frame scheduling. For that, it's just a bit of a juggling act. But you've got to find a really good project manager who can see through the matrix when they look at all these colors and these boxes, and they can kind of see where things are landing.
Is there a certain methodology, project management wise, you guys use for agile, or you have your own?
So we're all fully agile. The agency's always been agile. What's funny is a lot of discussion around in the agency space in tech, we come up with this kind of terminology, which is wagile, which is this kind of waterfall meets agile. Now, I find agile quite an interesting thing, because I think everyone wants to follow this kind of manifesto and follow it exactly. And purists will really argue for that. The truth is, especially in the agency sense, you will struggle to find a client, especially early stage where money is quite tight, and just say to them, hey, look, we'll work on a few sprints and see where we get to. And they'll say, oh, how much is it going to cost? And you're like, well, we don't know yet. We're just going to go. There's a certain level of like, there has to be a form of waterfall in that, which is there is a bit of a scope here and there is a bit of a specific brief that has to be achieved and a certain amount of money and a certain amount of time. It can't just be as fluid as maybe you find in product companies where they can just say, well, look, we've got a team, we're going to work at it for 3 to 4 months. Let's see how many sprints we can get to, see where we get to. Although they do have constraints, I don't think it's as tight. And so Wagile is kind of what we call this process of having some markers where you do have to have some kind of deliverables and goals kind of set up, but it's as fluid as we can be. So we do allow a lot of change, and this is another benefit of time and materials. Like we don't stop the clients from just changing their entire product overnight. Very often in early stage product development, you will get a first version, you'll take it to users, they will immediately give you feedback that completely changes your vision of it, and you're like, oh wait, we were building this, actually these people are really getting good use out for this, maybe we should shift into that market. If you come to us and then say, cool, let's change, we're not going to sit there and say, okay, let's go through a change request process, let's work all this out and what the new cost is. We're just like, cool, you've got 40 days left in the bucket, let's shift to that. Like, fine, let's see where we get to.
So you're not necessarily involved in the user experience research. Once they've got they kind of will go out and get feedback. You don't have to kind of take it to customer and get feedback on the product you design. That's more on them, is it, or typically?
Yeah, certainly, and we will sit alongside them with that. But we've got a lot of other agencies that we know do that really well as actual user testing agencies. We will say, go speak to experts about that stuff. I think this is another thing that a lot of business owners do is they start in the agency world. It's easy to just jump at every service. Everyone wants to be this full service agency. So you do development. Oh, they also need UX testing. Okay, cool. We do that as well. And because you see the money out there, you're just like, oh, we can figure that out. Like, it's okay. What I find is it kind of waters down your offering. Like, I've always really focused on this idea of doing the one thing really well, and we do that. Like app development and taking to market is what we do really well. We will work alongside UX teams and user testing teams to be able to say, okay, let's take on the feedback and work with you. But
user specialists, UV specialists.
Yeah. And I mean, even something that we've always stuck to is for a lot of apps, if you think of if you were building a new app, you're going to have some kind of marketing site that's going to tell the person all about it. And then you're going to have the app in the app store, right? We will work on the app in the app store. We're not going to work on the marketing side because that's not our strong point. Go and get someone else to do that. We'll work with them on branding and all that, but don't just try and that's easy money for us. We would see it as like, oh, there's a few grand on the table there that we could take, but it's like, no, we're not specialists.
You'd be better off if you were going to do that, making an entire new business separate to, which is obviously linked to, and having, especially you're obviously tech focused, you're not marketing focused, but find somebody who's marketing focused and kind of, I guess, have a group of organizations. But what would you say is Bad Dinosaur's bread and butter? Like, if you was what's the main products that you guys do? If someone was going to come to Bad Dinosaur, what do you guys do specifically, really well at?
Yeah, I would say just taking an idea to market, right? And that can be you as an entrepreneur and building that first version of a thing, or you can be an existing business. We work with a lot of local businesses here and businesses across the UK who are innovating in their own industry. So this isn't just someone coming up with an idea. This is them saying, we know competitors would need this product because we need it. So they build their own tool and then they can kind of sell that out to their own clients or their own customer base. I think there's that's kind of our bread and butter, right? That entrepreneurial journey. And it's really what we specialize in, is just that, build product, iterate, and go from there. I think we've got quite a good reputation now in the UK for being one of those go-to agencies that specializes there rather than working and aiming for the Coca-Colas and the huge.
Yeah, I looked through. You can see on Bad Dinosaur's website, blues.co.uk. There's a whole portfolio of various different apps and web-based products you can see on there as well. So it's really good looking stuff. Do you do, I guess, all the UI as well as the design aspects? So in terms of the actual design of how it looks and stuff, you guys are sort of UI designers as well?
Yeah. So we have what we would say is that kind of full end-to-end of product delivery, where it's the initial conversations with us are all about that kind of planning and strategy phase. Like, what are you trying to build? We run workshops with our clients. What are you trying to build? What are the problems you're trying to solve? And we are not yes people. We are entirely about like pushing back and saying, why do you want to build that? And one of our key methodologies is all about this kind of minimum viable product. Like, what is the least amount of things that we can build here to prove your concept? We kind of have this thing where we turn it on its head to say, how do you spend the least amount of money with us possible to prove whether this thing works or not?
Yeah.
I think that methodology then means that the clients kind of trust you a bit more about like, well, we're not trying to just tell you that here's your roster of all the things you want to build. Cool, we'll just do that. Then you're just an order taker. We like to be this kind of trusted advisor to our clients.
Yeah.
So that initial stage is all about like planning what you're going to build. We then do all the UX, we do the UI, we do storyboards, we do everything. Once the client's happy with where they think it's going, we're like, cool, now let's go into actual development and go and build this first version.
It's so much more than just simply taking a spec and building a product, but it's actually working with them to identify what they want from the product and what so do you think, in terms of, you know, if we talk about, you know, some of the startups, not specifically who they are or whatnot, but some of your clients who are, a lot of them not tech focused, have an idea, or is that the majority? Like,
yeah, majority of them are not tech backgrounds.
what challenge do you have there where they've got wild ideas and that isn't like realistic for their budgets or technically possible?
And that's what's great. Like those early phases of planning and strategy are great because we can then identify those things. So if someone's like, they want to do X, Y, Z, and they think it's going to be relatively simple, we can say, well, look, we know that that's actually a really difficult thing to do. Let's focus on maybe a simpler thing in the early stages to be able to achieve that. But yeah, they typically will be, like not tech backgrounds. And so we've become quite good at having that kind of what I'd call like developer whisperer kind of mentality of, we don't like to use big acronyms. We don't like to use terminology. We have a really upfront thing about saying there's no such thing as a stupid question with all of our clients. We're like, if you want us to repeat anything, just go for it. Like, you're coming into a whole crazy world. Tech it's insane.
Yeah.
And the rate of change is like no other industry. That when you are building in this industry, there's a lot of stuff thrown around that can be very confusing. So we really try and like distill that down. Yeah.
What do you think is the minimum requirement really for somebody who has an idea, an entrepreneur, for them to put it into fruition, like into like finance or research or?
Yeah, so I think our typical, when I have initial calls with clients, our typical budgets that we like to work with are kind of around the 30 to 50K mark. That seems to be a sweet spot of you can get something out to market with it. Now, obviously, there's things we've built for less and there's things we built for far more, but that seems to be quite a sweet spot, especially if you're just going to like something that you're building out on the web. In terms of where that funding comes from, there's a lot of really good grants and innovation funds that are around the UK to be able to achieve that kind of level of budget. So Innovate UK is one of the biggest ones. We get lots of grant funding through. So we will be able to provide our clients with a full proposal and costing of what they're going to build. They then go to Innovate and they've got competitions and things that they run. They provide that to them and then they can come back with the funding to actually do it.
Awesome.
And quite often that's like, fully funded, or they will do matched funding. Innovate does some really cool stuff in that space. Based up here in Edinburgh as well, there's Scottish Enterprise. So Scotland's also really trying to put a lot of money into the tech sector, and there's some really cool grant funding around that as well. So just because you don't have capital at the start doesn't mean that you can't go anywhere. But what I would say is you've got to start engaging with agencies or developers to be able to give you that blueprint.
Yeah.
Because all of those grant funding bodies, they're not just going to give you a blank check based on an idea. They want to see a blueprint of what you're going to do and what you're going to build and how it's going to fit together. And for that, you're going to need technical expertise from people like ourselves.
Do you do like free consultation for that kind of insight and then, follow through with the production, I imagine?
Yeah, so usually like I take a lot of the initial calls when we get to that stage of someone to now start discussing their idea. And I'll very often just be able to like have an hour chat with you, do a kind of ballpark. I can usually say, well, look, this is a build that looks like it's going to be about 40 to 50K or 60 to 100, whatever. At least give you some kind of frame of reference of what you think the funding is going to be required. And then that planning and strategy that we go into is a paid service with us, because you're getting some incredible expertise. I think we've taken like 80 or 90 products to market now over the last 5 years. There is a large amount of expertise in our business now for knowing the pitfalls, like what you should and shouldn't do and where you should spend your money, that we really value that. If someone's coming and talking to us for a 3-hour workshop about their product, that's very valuable to be able to understand what you should and shouldn't build, and our expertise in that. I think by not charging for that is a real shame. Probably a good example of, I think early on in businesses and agencies, especially very early, I was not charging for that kind of thing. If I go 4 or 5 years ago, it was very much, we'll do quite a lot of that initial quotation and proposal just all free of charge. But you very quickly learned that like that's a really highly valuable skill that you're putting in. It's actually, I would say, worth more than even the follow-on development, because it's the real planning.
It's like a mentorship kind of
exactly.
aspect to it. And what would you say was the conversion rate at the early stages? Was you finding you was putting a lot of time into that where it wasn't necessarily coming to fruition? And I can imagine that's again time management, isn't it?
And I think this, when you don't charge for services like that, everyone's got an idea, right? Like everyone stands in the shower and is like, I've got this idea, I'm going to change the world with it. And I think when we weren't charging, there was no filter to that. People would happily just come and talk to you about their idea all the time, and they would like.
You probably heard some absolutely horrible ideas,
crazy ideas, and everyone thinks they're very unique. But the truth is, honestly, like we very rarely hear very unique ideas. People have had them before. It's all about execution, right?
Yeah.
But
that was actually that's what I was going to actually bring it on to. Do you sometimes meet somebody, an entrepreneur who has a great idea, but when you meet them, you go, it's just not going to work with this person because of their attributes or their personality or who they, you can't see it in them. What do you do at that stage when somebody has a great idea and wants to put it through? Do you just try and support them on to be an entrepreneur? Or are you coaching people to be an entrepreneur at that point? Or?
It's a tough one. Hey, like we haven't had too many in the past, but it's definitely as people you come across where you just feel like, I don't think you've got the right, this doesn't seem like something that you're serious enough about, and that can sometimes be people who've just either got an investor who wants to build it for them or something like that, where they don't necessarily have a huge vested interest. Quite often people, maybe less so now, but people would approach us with an idea thinking that, in the next 2 to 3 years, I'll build this thing, I'll sell it for like 10 million, and I'm going to go and like live on a beach somewhere. And that mentality sometimes is that they're only building it as a means to like an end to, make a huge profit and walk away. Those people can sometimes be very hard to wrangle when it's actually building a product, because they don't feel passionate about it. They're trying to do it as a profit.
Passion is the commitment. It's probably you can't really call it a job being an entrepreneur, but the commitment that's required behind it, and the passion you need for it. If you're literally just trying to make a quick buck off of an idea, 99% of the time it's probably not going to work out. You touched on as well, and I'd like you to maybe, I don't know, give 3 or 4 points. You said about when you work with an entrepreneur and you work with these startups, and you said about flaws and where you've seen them go down before. For anybody who's maybe looking to start a startup or put a product or service, what would you say are the flaws that people, the trapdoors that sometimes people fall into, and hopefully they can avoid from your wisdom?
I would say definitely the sweating the small stuff. Like very often we will get into builds where we're building an app for someone, and they can get very caught up in like the button size, and the color of the button, the shape of the button. Has it got rounded corners? And
it takes 6 weeks to decide, do you want a squiggly line or do you want a straight line?
And I get it, right? Because I've built products for myself. I totally understand there's a vanity to it, right? If I build a thing and I put it out there, I want it to look really beautiful. And what I've struggled with over the years is you come across entrepreneurs who really will focus on those things that aren't really important. The truth is, you're going to have so many chances to iterate on your product and change it. Like your journey is years and years and years, not 6 months, not 2 years, not 3 years. And because they fixate on those things, they waste a lot of time and budget doing that. And we've seen quite a few entrepreneurs come through. We've built good products. They've really focused on silly things that we think they just shouldn't have focused on. And they run out of money. Like they then don't have money for marketing, and they spend too much time trying to make it look perfect. We really try and get people to understand that the first version you send out there doesn't have to be this beautiful thing. Like if it functions and it gives you, if your users get value from it, they will look past those things, right? People who use apps all the time, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever you use, you come across bugs all the time. People don't realize like how often they'll hit weird things where it just hangs or it does whatever. We'll just close the app and reopen it. Yeah. Why? Because they've got value from it. Like they want to do a thing on it. So if you build a product that's really got value, like people will come back to them and look past that stuff. They're not gonna look at the button, throw it down, and just be like, I'm not looking at this app anymore. That's gone. Like I think that's one of them. I would say another big one would probably be around, the length of time that these things take. Products take time. There's a lot of kind of, I don't know whether it comes out of America or this, Silicon Valley mentality of like, it's, a couple of years and then you IPO and you exit. We've worked with a lot of clients, the ones who are really successful now that are like 5 years, 6 years down the track, right? And they're just now getting good traction. The stories you hear about these like companies that get such crazy overnight success, it is very rarely overnight. And even if it is, that's why you've heard the story, because they're an outlier. Yeah. And everyone thinks they're going to have a special journey and they're going to be the special idea. But the truth is, like, you need to like really bed in for a few years. And I think having that outlook early on of saying, this is now a 5 to 10 year thing I'm going to do, will really benefit you, especially when you are faced with those decisions on button size and everything. You just think, is this a 5 year thing? No, like this is right now, I'd say it's a common pitfall.
I mean, it's okay. I know obviously it depends, but it depends on the product and whatnot. But do you think, like, if people want to profit, don't they, as quickly as possible? And sometimes these products, it takes a while to get traction and whatnot. Is there like a time frame that you'd say, or advice that you give to people in terms of when they can probably expect to start profiting? I guess it probably varies and depends, but.
Yeah, for some of our clients, that ROI comes really quickly. Like, certain clients that we work with, where they've, especially the existing businesses who've built a tool that they can either start selling to their competitors or even use with their customers, they see ROI within like 6 to 12 months. They've paid off the cost of that investment through the revenue they get through it. But when you're building, like, say, B2C products, actually building something that's going out to consumers and putting it in app stores, I would say having anything near that like 2 to 3 year mark is probably more a realistic view of it. And I think even then, unlikely that you'll probably be paying back your investment after 2 or 3 years. It's more that you will start going into profit and be, a business that can actually turn something around and have spare capital. But yeah, it's a hard one. There's a lot of grit involved in starting a business and a startup in tech, especially.
I know we didn't talk about it too much, but I know you mentioned at the beginning you tried, you created your own products. It didn't work out. At what point did you realize this isn't going to work and sort of cut your losses? Is there like is there a template, or people that are still dreamers and keep pumping money into something that's never going to work? Or
yeah, it's a hard one. We've often come across clients who do seem to they will keep putting effort and time into something where you just are like, I just don't know if this is going to work. But equally, we've come across some products where they've just they've really grit their teeth through a couple of years of like it not seeming to take off, but then they've done a certain thing and it's really gone wild.
Yeah.
And so I suppose it's not an easy thing to, and I don't want to say that like you should just keep, plodding on, but there certainly is a lot of that mentality of like, do this for a year or two and, oh, it's not working out, I should bug out.
Is that advice you give to your clients, or is it not really your responsibility to tell them what their dreams are, how far they want to take their product?
Where like the line that we try and straddle with this, right, is that very often the people we work with, they're experts in their field, right? And so although someone might not be coming from a tech background, say, we've worked with some law firms where they're trying to innovate in the kind of legal space. Their product might not be taking off, but like we don't know their market as well as they do. So like we can look at the numbers and we can say, hey, it's not doing well, the things we can do here. But at the end of the day, like they're the ones who maybe would know it better than us. So we try and straddle that line of giving advice, but at the same time, you've got to be like, we might be out of our depth here. Like we can only know this as a product, but you know the market better than we do.
Yeah, that's a great point. Anything else? Any other pitfalls?
I can't think of any at the moment. Yeah, definitely just not sweating the small stuff. That's a big one.
Some people are perfectionists, aren't they? And
that's
okay. It will kill it. It might kill it eventually, but wanting to strive towards perfection is probably more so important than being an absolute, 100% perfectionist, maybe.
It's a very. I struggle with it myself. We build a bunch of side products. Like I still build products in my spare time as well, just to kind of keep my interest up. And like I have that same thing, man. Like I get to a point where I'm like, it can go live now. I'm like, no, I can do a little bit better. And I find myself almost saying the same things that I'd say to a client, just to be like, this will be fine for the first version. And over the years, I think I've gotten a lot better at it. So I can't really get too bleak about someone who's new to it, they're not getting it. I'm like, I've been doing this for like whatever 13 years, and I still struggle with that where that line is, right?
Your passion of tech brings me on to a nicely point as well, that I think something we were speaking about before, we had the podcast, was how, as the business is growing and you as a founder and entrepreneur, managing the clients, account management, managing team and everything that's involved, I guess your responsibilities around the tech side and what you were passionate about and the reason you got into this in the first place and doing development, building products, working with clients is slowly, it's getting harder to kind of do that. I mean, myself, my girlfriend, she heads up she's a CEO of a SEO marketing agency, and she set up doing content, loves content. Now the business is 30, 40 people, and she's not able to do what she loves anymore. Or she loves everything about it. But how are you managing that? What advice would you give to people like who have that passion for technology, starting a business up and making sure they still have the love for it?
Yeah, I could probably have a few hours chat about this kind of topic, because it's got so many arms and legs, right? As I say, I'm a developer and I was building products from day one, and that's how the whole business started. And certainly when it grew over the years, I got to the point where I wasn't even being involved in the client calls. Like I wasn't even involved in, some clients would have come all the way through the agency and I just wouldn't have even met them, because we had people to deal with the whole process of sales and delivery. And I very quickly became just a manager of people, right? When the agency was at its kind of 22, 23 people, that at that point, you're not doing what you started out doing anymore. Now, some people can actually then just fall in love with the whole new part of it, right? And that can be a whole thing that you actually really enjoy. Myself personally, I really missed being involved in the clients. There's some really good, that feedback loop that you can sometimes have when you build a product and then you show it to someone and they just are wowed by it. They just are like, you've done exactly what I wanted. This has surpassed my expectations. There's such a like dopamine hit that you get from that like I don't get it anywhere else other than building product.
More than doing finances and one-to-ones.
Yeah, exactly. And recruitment and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so I suppose for me, and that's why it's kind of a big topic, is the agency got to that point where I just wasn't enjoying that part of it. And so last year I made an active decision to be like, how do I get back involved in this? And it looked as if the best way to do that was to downsize the business and actually go back into this position of being able to have a smaller, close-knit team of real experts in what they do and work closely on products with them, where I could provide like my best value. I don't think I was a particularly great person at running a company that was a bit larger. Not yet. Maybe later on, I will be able to slot into it. But right now, I really miss doing the dev and being involved in product. So I think to get back to your question, right, it's going to depend on the person. But certainly, if you're the person who can do the do, and you start just becoming someone who's managing the people who do the do, if that becomes something when you just don't think that it's what you enjoy anymore and you start being kind of a bit disenchanted by it, you've got two choices. Like either go back down a few layers to say, okay, now I'm just going back to doing the do, or you could start looking at people you can hire to actually be that CEO or that MD for you, and you can be more involved in product. That's probably a choice I could have made back then, but I chose to go this route, and I'm certainly a lot happier doing it now and being involved in product. I've got some amazing stuff that we've been working on with our clients that I just can't see it having gone any other way where I would have been happier. So I'm happy with my choice, but certainly, it's a pitfall of starting a business.
And you'll find that will come out in the work, that you do for your clients. So now that you've obviously made the decision and you've got, if something big did come across your desk in terms of a new client, how are you managing that? Are you sometimes having to say no to stuff because of?
Yeah, then this was a kind of part of the decision was we got to a point where, when you have 22 mouths to feed, when sales come through the door, you start being like, cool, this might not be a perfect fit, but like, what's the choice here? If we don't take on enough work, we're not going to be able to pay people salaries. I want to keep people employed and I want to keep people happy. So you start taking on potentially clients who you can see as not like a perfect fit. And or you don't see much like future in the product. And certainly that's what we started doing over the last few years. And I just was like, I'm tired of that. I don't want to do that anymore. And so now at our size, we are having to be a bit more like, I'm sorry, but it's a 6-month wait if you want us to do it, because we just don't have enough availability to do this. Trying to strike the balance between growing the business to be able to manage, that longer lead time, but also not kind of giving into just building stuff for, building's sake. It's a really, I don't have the right answer. We're trying to find that balance.
Hunter Bond are a recruitment agency. We're a headhunter, and we're in the exact same situation that we have consultants who are adhering to vacancies and clients. If we haven't got enough for them, then they haven't got enough roles to work. If it's too much, we can't deliver to the clients. So it's finding that middle of having just enough work, that Goldilocks porridge, just enough work to keep you guys happy and growing and whatnot, whilst not taking on too much. But yeah. Is there periods where, and again, I guess this is a great benefit between just having Coca-Cola or you having multiple clients, is that if you lose Coca-Cola, you're screwed. Whereas like if you lose one or two, you've got still enough work, you can bring in others. Do you see that as do you notice in any agencies that heavily rely on one account, lose the accounts? And
I mean, there's been around Edinburgh, there's a good few agencies that I know that have been, that's been the end of them over the years, because they took on a huge client and it occupied 50% of their billables, and then they lost them, right? And agencies run on such a margin, right? It's usually sitting at like a 10 to 15% margin in once everything comes out in the wash, that cutting out 50% of your client base, like you immediately are, sitting in negative equity in your business. So I think it's easier for us because we don't have one or two big clients who occupy all of our schedule. So we can kind of chop and change quite a bit without having too much stress around that. There's always another one that kind of slot in. But it's, sometimes that's a double-edged sword, right? Because those big clients who are just constantly, you can see why you get addicted to it, to be this is great. It's a given. They've got a budget. They spend with us every year. All we have to do is take them out for dinner every few weeks and they're happy, right? But man, when that client leaves you, you left with a big gap.
Yeah. How do you most of your clients come to you? Do you have especially in the earlier days when you were starting up your agency, was it just through connections, or how did you sort of find the work?
A lot of referral stuff. Hey, I think that's one of the things that anyone who's growing an agency, there's certain things that you can't really speed up, right? And one of them is like referrals, because referrals make up probably like half of the work that we do. Like people will promote us and talk about us in the market, and then they'll send people that way. But to do that, you've just got to knuckle down and build lots of products, and work with lots of clients. So in the early years, it's kind of one of those frustrating things that you're like, well, you're just going to have to put the effort in, and eventually you have a reputation, right? So early stages of the agency. And early stages of the agency, I found it very difficult to convince people to do time and materials because I didn't have reputation. They're just like, who are you? I'm just going to give you money, and you're not going to necessarily say if I can or can't get this thing at the end, like how much is going to cost? It's going to be about X. Now we have such a portfolio. You're like, we've got reputation, man. Like, and we've got this gold standard that I find that a lot easier to be able to find the work now. But do you
for a lot of, people do that? Do you how do you call it, time for material? Is that the best way to you think, to rather than per product or whatnot? You think
tough. So and probably it's a bit of lingo right in the industry, but time and materials is the one option. The other is fixed price. So you come to me and you say, how much is that? I say £50,000. We start building it. What I need to do at the start is I need to really get exact specification, because for me as a developer, what I don't want is halfway through the project, you saying to me, oh, does it have widget X? And I'm like, no, we haven't built widget X. And then I'm suddenly like, oh crap, we need to also build widget X. And as an agency owner, what I'm going to try and do is, on a fixed price budget, I'm going to try and deliver it as cheap as possible, right? Because I have a commercial interest.
So you can make the margin,
in doing the best margin. And this is something I've always, I struggled with early on with trying to convince clients of, because we didn't have that reputation. But now it's a lot easier to kind of show them our work and have people who, go good testimonials about how we work to be able to buy into that. But I always use that example of, if you go to that agency, that business owner is going to work out how to deliver this cheap as possible. Like, I know not everyone's going to do that, but like that at the end of the day is what it comes down to. And if there's overrun, they're going to just stop taking your calls. Like, at least with us and anyone who work in time materials, you know, it doesn't benefit me, right? All I need to make sure of is that I've got a really good team, and the people that you're paying for are incredibly skilled at what they do, so they can do the best possible job in the time they have. And I make sure that they're doing their job. That's all I have to do. I don't have an incentive to try and deliver this cheaper for you. Like, I want to deliver it right, you know. And, yeah.
And do you find clients are sometimes a little bit wary about time and material because there's an unpredictable of the total cost, I guess, if you know if things don't happen within the time frame that you discuss initially. So I guess the sell, you know, the objection hand to that is what you kind of just explained maybe a little bit. The reputation you have, I guess. Oh, the transparency as well. I think that's probably key. You know, they can, you know, as long as you offer that transparency and really get them to be able to see the production in progress throughout the time, that's going to give them a lot more comfort.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Some people just, especially when you work with existing businesses, they seem to be far more on board with it. They maybe have come across it quite a lot before. They're okay. The entrepreneurial ones where they're just wanting, like, I need a price tag to take to investors. That can be a little bit more difficult because they find it a harder sell from their end. But reputation has always helped that. And I think even if you do fixed price, those things always end up having buffers and, you know, extra time here and padding and that. I think they kind of much of a muchness at the end of the day. Once you actually look at it, you know, post the product, you know, you could go through two agencies, one doing fixed and one time materials. I think you probably come out at the same at the end anyway, but the difference being is the T&M process is going to be far less about pushing back to you to say you can't do that. We're all about, like, you can do anything. We're not going to then argue about what you said was in the original scope or not, you know.
Nice. Well, so for any entrepreneurs or anyone with an idea, as we so, be passionate, be committed. But of course, you can find Bad Dinosaur at baddinosaur.co.uk. Kyle, you can find Kyle on LinkedIn, I'm sure. We'll do some time management to work out some future consultations potentially. But you can find all of the recent work and testimonials and examples of products on their website as well. So please do reach out. Anything you want to, any last line to finish on, Kyle? Or?
No, I'd say, if you are thinking about starting an agency, or even if you have an agency yourself and are looking for kind of to chat about how things are going, whatever, I really enjoy doing that as well. I really enjoy talking to other business owners. We call them, like, it's frenemies, right? I'm friends with all the other agency owners in Edinburgh. I'm friends with loads of them, even though they might be competitors of ours. We chat, we catch up and talk about our different struggles that we have. Because all of this stuff, when you're starting a business, like, you've got to share your problems. If you're not sharing them, then it's just stuck in your head, right? So talk to other business owners. I'm always here for that kind of stuff if anyone wants to get in touch. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Carl. Have a great day, and speak to you soon.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of the day. Cheers, man. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.